Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. I hope you are doing well. Today's video is a little bit different, kind of a fun one, incorporating my university studies with my love of books. I'm going to be talking about two memoirs, Between the World and Me, and I've been meaning to tell you, A Letter to My Daughter, and their real world influence, real world application with critical race theory. We are having a little coffee break in the conference at the moment, and I'll be on after the break. So if you're interested in hearing a little bit more about that, please do keep watching. So yes, my name is Rachel, and my presentation today is titled Colorblind or Racialized Reflections in North American Memoirs. So what you've been waiting for, getting into the memoirs now. The first one is Between the World and Me, published in 2015 by Ta-Nehisi Coates. This is a best-selling memoir written by the American author who's also a former national correspondent. It is written as a letter to the author's son to prepare him for what it means to be a Black teenager and a Black man in the United States. Coates reflects on their generational differences, particularly in regard to faith in the criminal justice system, when his son believes the police officers responsible for killing 18-year-old Michael Brown in Missouri in 2014 would be charged. As Coates predicted, the officers are found not guilty and his son is devastated. The author considers how we use language to sugarcoat the real-world violence those words represent. Quote, but all our phrasing, race relations, racial chasm, racial justice, racial profiling, white privilege, even white supremacy, serves to obscure that racism is a visceral experience, that it dislodges brains, blocks airways, rips muscle, extracts organs, cracks bones, breaks teeth, end quote. Coates is explicit with his understanding of the institution of policing to be founded on racist ideology. He writes, quote, it is not necessary that you believe that the officer who choked Eric Gardner set out that day to destroy a body. All you need to understand is that the officer carries with him the power of the American state and the weight of an American legacy, and they necessitate that of the bodies destroyed every year, some wild and disproportionate number of them will be Black, end quote. These citations demonstrate the intersectional experience of the author in the U.S. matrix of domination, and his fears for his own child who will be growing up in this world that racializes him and simultaneously attempts to deny the fact that race-based discrimination and violence continues to exist. In I've Been Meaning to Tell You, A Letter to My Daughter, which was published in 2018, the Canadian writer and professor of literature David Cheriandy writes to his 13-year-old daughter. The author has African and Indian ancestry, with his parents immigrating to Canada from Trinidad. He reflects on his child's racial identity as mixed race, as her mother is a white Canadian as well. The author is in awe of his daughter's self-assuredness and bravery when thinking about his own youth, and marvels at how she identifies as Canadian without feeling she needs to explain herself further. Cheriandy reflects on his fears and concerns watching the 2017 U.S. presidential inauguration and stresses Canada's false belief of, quote, being better than their southern neighbor, as he and his family attend a vigil following a shooting at a mosque in Quebec City that same year. Reflecting on the Islamophobic attack, he writes, quote, but the fact is that I require little imagination to understand what it feels like to be considered dispensable by the powerful within a country, to be viewed as unconnected to the fabric of Canadian society, or as a threat, singled out in lines and at borders, visibly targeted by those who are, in fact, the most secure. I do not empathize with victims of bigotry and racism. I know the feeling intimately and viscerally, end quote. Writing to his daughter on the topic of achieving equality through colorblindness and erasure of difference, he reflects, quote, I have heard some well-wishing folk proclaim people like you the happy future for humankind, imagining that racial prejudice will come to an end when everyone, through countless intermixings, achieves the same features and tone of brown. Forgive me, dearest one, but I don't share this hope. The future I yearn for is not one in which we'll all be clothed in sameness, but one in which we'll finally learn to both read and respectfully discuss our differences. The author recognizes that while gendered, racialized, and class discrimination and oppression cannot be exchanged for others, he does know what it is to be discriminated against and oppressed on the basis of his own intersectional identity. He He does not believe that erasing difference will result in the overcoming of racism, but that respectful recognition and acceptance of different lived experience is the only way to truly progress. So bringing it back into the law, I wanted to discuss a little bit about the necessity of critical race theory that the memoirs have already demonstrated. It is an interdisciplinary concept which argues that race is a socially constructed idea which has historically been ingrained in modern institutions. It examines racial bias in housing, education, and especially in the criminal justice system. Professor Kristen Adedonian defines CRT as providing, quote, an important premise for the historical context of how present-day racial inequality and oppression should be analyzed. It illustrates how killings and violence by police are a consistent, persistent, and inescapable truth for Black men, end quote. Currently, there's an ongoing push to ban critical race theory, both the teaching and the application of it, due to the ill-informed belief that it causes division. In 2014, criminologist Sonia Starr's research into arrest and incarceration rates determined that, quote, nearly 80% of Black arrestees are incarcerated, compared with only 68% of white arrestees. And Black arrestee sentences are, on average, over 2 years longer for the same crime. We are all aware of the Black Lives Matter protests in response to the filmed and widely circulated footage of the brutality committed against Black men by the police. As both Between the World and Me and I've Been Meaning to Tell You demonstrate, neither the United States nor Canada are post-racial countries. Colorblind ideology neglects to address systemic violence and issues ingrained in modern institutions. Critical race theory is not teaching or creating racial division, it is acknowledging and combating the racial bias that the law was built on. And in conclusion, as the scholars mentioned in this presentation, including Kimberly Crenshaw, Patricia Hill Collins, Luce Irigaray, Gayatri Spivak, among others, have theorized, and Ta-Nehisi Coates and David Cheriandy have eloquently demonstrated in their memoirs, there is a necessity to recognize and acknowledge intersectional identity and the way in which different people experience the world. In this way, literature can work hand in hand with the law to dismantle systemic and institutional racial bias through intentional, deconstructive, anti-racist movements. In the words of educator Amy Van Wagenen, critical race theory seeks its own end, and the strategy is to destroy the conditions of its own making. Thank you very much. I think that went well. I'm such a poor public speaker and I get really nervous. I have this thing where I turn bright red. I can feel that I get warm, whether I'm physically in front of people or, you know, on the computer like today. But yeah, everybody's been super nice. All of the presentations today have been very interesting. So yeah, I think it went well. I highly recommend these two memoirs. They are both really just eloquent and considerate and just really beautifully and heartbreakingly written. Obviously they're written to their children, but assumed to be consumed by a wider readership. And I really, really enjoy both of them. Very impactful, and I would highly recommend picking them up if you haven't already. So thank you so much for watching. Let me know if you enjoyed seeing a little bit into how literature works in the PhD world. Let me know if you'd like to see more, or if you'd rather not. That's okay too. I hope you are having a lovely day, and see you soon. Bye!
Doctor or PhD candidate, sorry. So Rachel.